Welcome to the Korean Mafia romance stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. The night the Korean Mafia boss paid off the loan that was about to break my brother's legs. I thought he had saved my life. I did not realize he had already decided I was not leaving his world. My name is Talia Brooks, and if you have ever worked the Las Vegas Strip long enough, you learn one rule very quickly. Keep your head down. Smile. Carry the drinks. Do not ask questions. I worked nights at a casino cocktail floor where the lights never turned off and the music never stopped. The kind of place where men lose $10,000 in an hour and laugh like it means nothing. Then I worked mornings at a greasy diner 3 blocks away, pouring coffee for tourists who had not slept yet. Between those two jobs I barely slept. But that was the only way to keep the rent paid and my younger brother in school. Marcus was 19, smart enough to get out of the city if he finished community college. I told myself every shift, every blister on my feet, every rude drunk customer was worth it if it meant Marcus had a chance at a life that did not look like mine. Everything fell apart because of Andre. Andre was my ex-boyfriend and the worst mistake I ever made. When we dated he always talked about business opportunities, about fast money, about how Las Vegas was full of people too rich to notice when a few $1,000s disappeared. What he never mentioned was that the money he borrowed came from men who did not believe in second chances. 3 months ago Andre vanished without warning. His phone stopped working. His apartment was empty. And the $40,000 loan he left behind somehow landed on me. The first time the loan collectors visited the diner they were polite. The second time they were not. The third time they came to the casino. I was carrying a tray full of champagne glasses across the gaming floor when 2 men stepped directly into my path. They wore expensive suits but their eyes were cold in a way that made my stomach tighten. One of them leaned close enough that I could smell whiskey on his breath. "You owe $40,000, he said quietly. "Your boyfriend disappeared. That means the debt belongs to you." "I never borrowed that money," I whispered. He shrugged. "Life is unfair." Then he said the sentence that made my hands start shaking. "If we do not see payment soon, we start with your brother's legs." The tray slipped slightly in my hands. Marcus had nothing to do with Andre. Marcus barely even knew him. I tried to speak but the words stuck in my throat. That was when the room went quiet. It was subtle at first. Dealers slowed their movements. Security guards looked toward the entrance. Even the men threatening me stopped talking. Someone had just walked onto the casino floor. And suddenly every person within 20 feet seemed to know it. A tall man in a dark suit approached our table with calm, deliberate steps. He moved like someone who had never been rushed in his entire life. His expression was completely neutral, his eyes sharp and observant. I had never seen him before, but the reaction around him told me everything I needed to know. The 2 men in front of me straightened immediately. The stranger stopped beside our table and looked at them. "How much does she owe?" he asked. "40,000, one of them answered carefully. The man reached into his coat, removed a thick envelope of cash, and placed it on the table without even counting it. "The debt is finished," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away before I could even ask his name. I stood there frozen, staring at the money on the table, while someone behind me whispered a name that made the 2 collectors step back immediately. Ryu Dae-hyun. I thought that moment meant my nightmare was over. I was wrong. The next morning 3 black cars were waiting outside my apartment. I woke up the next morning to the sound of engines idling outside my apartment building. At first I thought it was just another delivery truck or a rideshare driver waiting for a passenger. But the noise did not move. It stayed there, low and steady, like something patient enough to wait all day. I pushed the curtain aside and looked down at the street. 3 black cars were parked along the curb. Not taxis. Not police. All identical, polished, expensive. The kind of vehicles you see outside luxury hotels on the strip. 2 men stood beside the first car. Both wearing dark suits and sunglasses even though the sun had barely come up. They were not talking. They were simply watching the entrance to my building. My stomach dropped. For a moment I just stood there holding the curtain, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe someone important lived nearby. Maybe a tourist had booked some kind of private transport. But the longer I stared, the more obvious the truth became. One of the men looked directly up toward my window as if he knew exactly where I was standing. I stepped back immediately. Marcus was still asleep on the couch in the living room. He had been studying until almost 3 in the morning, surrounded by textbooks and empty soda cans. I did not want to wake him yet. The last thing he needed before an exam was another problem. I quietly walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, trying to steady the tight feeling in my chest. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. For a second I considered ignoring it. After everything that had happened the night before, the idea of answering unknown calls made my nerves crawl. But something told me this call was connected to the cars outside. I picked up the phone slowly. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm and professional. Miss Brooks. Our boss would like to speak with you. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? You met him last night. I did not need them to say the name. The image of the man placing the envelope of cash on the casino table flashed through my mind. Immediately. Ryu Dae-hyun. I never asked him to pay that money, I said quickly. That is understood. Then why are there 3 cars outside my apartment? A small pause followed. Just long enough to confirm that the caller knew exactly what I was talking about. For your safety. I almost laughed. My safety? Those men terrified me last night. Yes, the voice said calmly. And they work for people who do not like our boss. The words made my skin go cold. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Before I could respond, a quiet knock sounded at my apartment door. My heart jumped into my throat. The voice on the phone spoke again. Please answer the door. I hesitated for only a moment before walking slowly toward the entrance. Marcus shifted on the couch but did not wake. I opened the door a few inches. The same man from the casino stood in the hallway. Ryu Dae-hyun looked exactly the same as the night before. Dark suit. Perfect posture. Calm expression that revealed nothing about what he was thinking. 2 bodyguards waited a few steps behind him near the stairwell. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then he glanced past me into the apartment, taking in the small living room, the worn furniture, and Marcus asleep under a thin blanket. You should not stay here anymore, he said. I crossed my arms immediately. I did not invite you here. No, then why are you here? He stepped slightly closer, though he still kept a respectful distance. The men you owed money to do not belong to my organization, he said. They belong to my enemies. My chest tightened. You already said the debt was finished. It is. Then we are done. He studied me for a moment with an expression that was almost curious. You misunderstand the situation. I felt irritation rise in my voice. Then explain it. When I paid that debt, he said calmly, they assumed you were connected to me. I am not. That does not matter. A long silence followed. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. What are you saying? I asked quietly. I am saying that the people who loaned your boyfriend $40,000 now believe you are someone under my protection. And that means they may try to hurt me. The words landed like a weight in my stomach. I did not ask to be part of your war. I know. Then fix it. I am fixing it. He gestured slightly toward the cars outside. That is why I am here. I shook my head. I am not leaving my apartment because of something I did not do. His voice remained calm. Your workplace has already received 3 anonymous complaints about you this morning. My eyes narrowed. What? Your manager will call you within the hour. As if on cue, my phone vibrated in my hand. The caller ID showed the casino. I stared at the screen while the phone rang. When I looked back up at him, his expression had not changed. You see, he said quietly, the problem has already started. The phone finally stopped ringing. What happens if I stay? I asked. He answered without hesitation. You will be followed. Harassed. Possibly attacked. And if I go with you? You will be protected. I looked past him down the hallway toward the morning sunlight pouring through the stairwell window. This sounds less like protection, I said slowly. And more like control. For the first time a faint hint of something moved behind his eyes. Miss Brooks, he replied quietly, if I wanted to control you, I would not be standing here explaining anything. I hesitated. Marcus shifted again in his sleep behind me. My brother's legs. The memory of that threat flashed through my mind. Finally I exhaled. If I leave, I said carefully, this is temporary. Yes. I can walk away whenever I want. Yes. He stepped aside from the doorway and gestured toward the elevator at the end of the hall. You are free to go whenever you choose. I studied his face one last time. Then I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the hallway. 5 minutes later I was standing inside the elevator of a luxury tower overlooking the Las Vegas Strip. And when the doors opened, Two unfamiliar men were already waiting outside as if they had expected me. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. The doors closed with a quiet metallic sound, sealing me inside a space lined with polished mirrors and soft golden lighting. My reflection stared back at me from every angle. Same black waitress uniform from last night. Same tired eyes from working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. But somehow my life had shifted so violently in less than 12 hours that the woman staring back at me almost looked like a stranger. Ryu Daehyun stood beside me without speaking. His bodyguards remained behind in the hallway, which meant for the first time since this entire situation began, it was just the two of us inside the elevator. The silence between us was heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt more like standing beside a storm that had not decided yet whether it would strike. I finally broke the silence. So this is the part where you take me to some hidden office and explain the rules of your organization? His gaze shifted slightly toward me. No, that single word hung in the air. Then where are we going? I asked. The penthouse. I stared at him. You were serious about that? Yes. You do realize I still have a job. He glanced at my phone, still in my hand. You should answer it. As if summoned by his words, my phone began ringing again. The casino manager's name flashed across the screen. My stomach tightened as I pressed the answer button. Talia, my manager said without greeting, his voice stiff and formal. We received several complaints about you this morning. What kind of complaints? Harassment claims from 2 guests and a security report about inappropriate conduct on the floor. My heart started pounding. That is not true. I understand, he replied carefully. But corporate is involved now. Until the situation is investigated, you are suspended. Suspended. The word echoed in my head. For how long? I asked quietly. Indefinitely. The line went dead. For a few seconds I just stared at the phone in disbelief. Then I laughed once under my breath, though there was no humor in it. You planned that, I said. Daehyun shook his head slightly. No, but you knew. Yes. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the top floor. The doors slid open, revealing a private hallway lined with dark marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Las Vegas Strip. The view alone looked like something from a luxury magazine. Endless lights, glowing casinos, and the desert skyline stretching far into the distance. He stepped out first. I followed slowly, still trying to process the fact that my main source of income had just disappeared in the span of one phone call. This is unbelievable, I muttered. What part? He asked calmly. The part where my life is collapsing and you keep acting like it is just another Tuesday. We reached a tall black door at the end of the hallway. He pressed his thumb against a small scanner beside it. The lock clicked instantly. When the door opened, the space inside looked less like an apartment and more like the top floor of a luxury hotel suite. Glass walls wrapped around the entire living area, revealing a full panoramic view of the strip below. Expensive furniture filled the room in clean, modern lines. A long balcony stretched along the outside, high enough above the city that the noise of traffic barely reached this level. This is temporary, he said. I walked slowly into the room, trying to hide how overwhelming the place felt. This probably costs more than my entire apartment building, I said. Possibly. I turned toward him. You cannot just move someone into a place like this and expect them to act normal. I do not expect normal. Good. I walked to the window and looked down at the glowing river of traffic moving along Las Vegas Boulevard. People below looked like tiny dots moving between casinos and nightclubs. So what happens now? I asked. You stay here. And do what? Nothing. I turned around sharply. Nothing? Yes. That might work for someone like you, I said, frustration rising again. But I cannot just sit around while everything in my life falls apart. He studied me carefully. Your life is not falling apart. I just lost my job. You lost a job that put you directly in reach of my enemies. That job paid my rent. I will cover your expenses. I stared at him in disbelief. I am not your responsibility. No, he said quietly. You are not. The answer surprised me. Before I could respond, he walked toward the balcony doors and opened them. Warm desert air drifted inside, carrying the distant hum of the city. You asked earlier why I helped you, he said. Yes. He looked out over the strip for a moment before answering. Because you were standing inside a trap. And now? You are standing outside of it. I crossed my arms. This feels less like outside and more like a different cage. He did not argue. Instead he turned and walked toward the kitchen area where a glass pitcher of water sat on the Counter. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to me. You can leave whenever you want, he said calmly. You keep saying that. Because it is true. I walked toward the elevator again, half expecting him to stop me. He did not. He simply watched. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the casino floor. The ride down felt faster this time. But the moment the doors opened, I realized something had changed. Every person in the lobby looked up. Security guards. Dealers walking off shift. Cocktail waitresses I worked with last night. They all stared at me the same way people stare at someone walking beside a powerful politician. One of the guards leaned toward another and whispered something I could not hear. But I saw the word form on his lips. Daehyun. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. The moment he paid that debt, the entire city had already decided who I belonged to. When the elevator doors opened onto the casino floor again, the atmosphere had changed in a way that was impossible to ignore. Conversations slowed. Dealers paused mid-shuffle. Even the cocktail servers who normally rushed between tables seemed to move more carefully around. Me. I had worked in this casino long enough to understand how people reacted when someone powerful entered the room. But the difference now was that the powerful person was not standing beside me. He was somewhere far above the building in a penthouse. Yet the entire room still reacted as if his shadow had followed me downstairs. I stepped onto the carpeted floor and walked toward the exit, trying to ignore the stares. My suspension meant I had no reason to stay here anyway. The sooner I left this place, the sooner I could start figuring out how to fix the mess that had swallowed my life overnight. But the moment I pushed open the casino doors and stepped onto the strip, I realized leaving was not going to be simple. 2 men stood across the street beside a black sedan. They were not hiding. They were not pretending to be tourists either. Both of them wore leather jackets despite the desert heat. And both of them turned their heads the exact second I walked outside. My pulse quickened. I started walking north along the sidewalk, blending into the crowd of tourists carrying plastic cups and flashing neon souvenirs. Music from the nearby casino entrances spilled into the street while bright billboards pulsed overhead like artificial daylight. Behind me, the footsteps followed. I did not have to look to know they were still there. Anyone who spends enough time working late-night shifts learns to recognize the feeling of being watched. It crawls across your shoulders like static electricity. I reached the corner and turned sharply toward a busy crosswalk. Hundreds of people filled the intersection. Cameras flashing as the fountain show across the street erupted into music and water. For a moment I hoped the crowd would hide me. But when I glanced back again, the 2 men were still there. One of them smiled slightly when our eyes met. The message was clear. They were not trying to hide. They wanted me to know they were there. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I kept walking for another block before finally stopping beside a row of taxis. My phone came out of my pocket before I even consciously decided what I was doing. The number I dialed was the last one that had called me. It rang once. Then his voice answered. Yes. I tried to keep my tone calm. But my heart was beating too fast. There are 2 men following me. A brief pause. Describe them. Leather jackets. Dark hair. One is tall, the other shorter with a scar near his jaw. Another pause. I see. You see? I repeated. That is all you have to say? Where are you? Outside the Bellagio. Stay there. The call ended. I stared at the phone in disbelief. That was it. No reassurance. No explanation. Just 2 words in silence. Across the street, the 2 men had stopped walking. They leaned casually against their car, still watching me like hunters studying prey that had wandered into the open. 5 minutes passed. Then a black SUV pulled up beside the taxi stand. The window rolled down slowly. Ryu Daehyun sat inside. His expression looked exactly the same as it had earlier that morning. Calm, unbothered. As if people being followed by gang members in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip was nothing unusual. Get in, he said. I opened the passenger door and climbed into the vehicle immediately. The moment the door shut, the SUV pulled away from the curb. I twisted in my seat and looked back through the rear window. The 2 men remained beside their car, watching us leave. You knew they were there, I said. Yes. You let them follow me. They needed to see something. And what exactly was that? That you are under my protection. I turned toward him sharply. You could have mentioned that before I spent 10 minutes wondering if I was about to be kidnapped. His eyes remained on the road ahead. They were observing. That does not make me feel better. It should. Why? Because they did not approach you. I crossed my arms tightly. Maybe they were waiting for a better moment. No, he said calmly. They were waiting to see how I would respond. The SUV turned onto a quieter side street away from the main strip traffic. And now they know. He continued. Know what? That harming you would start a war. Silence filled the vehicle. The casual way he said the word war made the air inside the car feel heavier. You are talking about people's lives like they are chess pieces, I said quietly. That is because they are. I looked out the window at the endless lights of the city sliding past. So what happens now? They will report back to their organization. And then? They will decide whether you are worth the trouble. The answer sent another chill through my chest. And if they decide I am? He finally glanced toward me. Then you stay close to me. I stared at him. You keep saying I am free to leave. You are. But every time I try, something stops me. His expression did not change. Yes. Frustration flared again. That does not sound like freedom. He looked forward again as the SUV turned toward the entrance of the luxury tower. Freedom, he said quietly, does not mean the world becomes safe. The vehicle stopped beneath the building's entrance lights. I stepped out slowly, looking up at the tall glass tower stretching high into the night sky. Somewhere near the top floor was the penthouse where he expected me to stay. And for the first time since this started, a disturbing realization settled into my mind. He had never forced me to stay. But every path that led away from him was slowly disappearing. That night the city of Las Vegas looked different from the balcony of the penthouse. From 70 floors above the strip, the casinos no longer felt loud or chaotic. The neon lights blended together into a glowing river stretching through the desert. Thousands of people moved below, chasing luck, money, and the illusion that they controlled their own fate. I stood against the glass railing with my arms folded, the warm desert wind brushing across my face, trying to convince myself that I could still walk away from all of this. Behind me, the apartment remained quiet. Ryu Dae-hyun had not said another word since we returned from the strip. He moved through the penthouse like someone who had lived inside silence for most of his life. At one point he placed a glass of water on the counter beside me and walked toward the office. Without interrupting my thoughts. You know I can leave, I said suddenly, breaking the silence. He did not look up from the documents in his hands. Yes. I could take a flight tomorrow morning. Yes. And you would not stop me. No. I turned toward him slowly. Then why does it feel like every road out of the city leads back to you? He finally looked up. For a moment his expression softened just enough to reveal something honest beneath the calm surface. Because my enemies already believe you belong to my world, he said. The answer settled heavily in my chest. I looked back out at the strip again. Somewhere down there were the two men who had followed me earlier. Somewhere else were the people who had loaned Andre $40,000 and decided breaking my brother's legs was a reasonable way to collect it. The truth became impossible to ignore. The man behind me had not locked the door. He had simply turned the world outside into a place too dangerous to walk through alone. And somehow, without ever asking for it, I had become the safest person in Las Vegas as long as I stayed under the protection of the Korean Mafia boss who paid my debt. Morning arrived quietly over Las Vegas, washing the neon lights into pale desert sunlight. From the penthouse window the strip looked almost peaceful. Like the chaos of the night before had never happened. But I knew better now. Somewhere in this city there were men who would gladly hurt me to get to Ryu Dae-hyun. And somewhere in the same city was the one man who had already decided I would never face that danger alone. I realized something then. My freedom had not been stolen. It had been replaced by a protection so powerful that the entire world outside suddenly felt smaller. And far more dangerous. Maybe someday I would walk away from his world. But not today. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense mafia drama like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. If you were Talia, would you trust the man who saved you? Or risk everything to escape his protection?